Alright guys, well now we're going to start talking about multi-step problems. We've gone over addition, we've gone over subtraction, we've talked about multiplication, and now we're getting into the part where we're going to start seeing some word problems and some different things where we need to use all the skills that we're gaining to solve it. Okay? And it's important to remember that this is why I talked about not just using keywords, but to really look for understanding of what's going on in these word problems. Because as we get into multi-step problems, you're going to see keywords in there for adding and subtracting, and if you don't understand the problem, you might add but forget to subtract to get your actual answer, your final answer, what the question's really asking you about. And the same thing with multiplication. You might miss the multiplication part. So remember, addition. When we talk about addition, quantities, amounts are being put together. And remember, these are the things that are hanging up on my room, the understanding that we're looking for addition. So different quantities are being put together. They're being added together, right? Okay? When we look at subtraction, okay, we're looking at amounts and quantities that are being taken away from a bigger amount. Something's being lost, given away. It's being deducted, pulled away from. Okay, that's the understanding we're looking at. And when we see that, we know we need to subtract. The other thing we look at with subtraction is when we're comparing two numbers or two amounts. When we're comparing two amounts, we use subtraction to see how much bigger the larger amount is than the smaller amount. Okay, and that's important to understand with subtraction. And then again, multiplication. Okay, that's equal groups. We're looking for to use multiplication when we see equal amounts or equal groups being put together. Then we know we need to multiply. So we need to read our word problems carefully and really pay attention and figure out what these problems are asking us. Alright, so we're going to take a look at a few of them, and then I'm going to have you practice one on your own. Alright, so here's a problem. It says, for Halloween, Debbie and her sister combined the candy they received. Debbie had 32 pieces of candy, while her sister had 42. If they ate 35 pieces the first night, how many pieces do they have left? So here's two problems I have here. Okay? And the question that they're finally asking me is how much is left. Okay? Now the great thing about word problems is that your answers are there. You have everything you need in this problem to solve it. All the numbers, everything you need, you just have to know what to do with them. Do I add, subtract, multiply? Eventually we're going to have to ask, well, do we need to divide? But we don't have to worry about that right now. We haven't learned about division. So what I see here is two amounts being added together. Debbie has 32 pieces and her sister has 42. So I need to do 32 plus 42 to see how much they have all together. 2 plus 2, that's going to give me 4. 30 plus 40 gives me 70. So they have 74 pieces of candy all together. But I'm not finished there, because the question tells me that they eat a certain amount, which is right here. They're going to eat 35 pieces of candy. That's a lot of candy to eat in one night. And they want to know, well, what's left? So I know they have 74 because they were combining amounts, so we added. Well, now some things are being lost and taken away from that 74. So I take my 74 and I subtract the amount they ate, and that was 35. Okay? Oh, I can't subtract 5 from 4 because 4 is smaller than 5, so I need to regroup. Cross out my 7, and I borrow 1. That becomes a 6. I add 10 over here, so that's going to give me 14 ones now. 14 minus 5 equals 9. 6 tens minus 3 tens gives me 3 tens. And there they go. So they have 39 pieces of candy left. And don't remember, I'm not going to do it here because it's hard for me to write with this pen. But remember, when you're answering these questions, we have 3 points in order to get these right. And that's showing your work, getting a right answer is another point, showing your work is 1 point, getting a right answer another point, and the third point is answering the question in a complete sentence. I'm not going to write that sentence. It's hard for me with this pen and this mouse. So, but you guys know how to do that. So there you have it. It took me 2 steps to solve this. I first had to add to see what they had all together, and then I needed to subtract what they ate in order to solve this problem. Let's check out the next one. Joe worked 6 hours and made $8 for each hour he worked. So for each hour he worked, he made $8. He worked 6 hours. His brother Todd worked 7 hours and made $7 for each hour he worked. Who made more money and by how much? So this is important because when I look at this question, it's asking me for 2 answers. He wants to know who made more money. See? Who made more money? And then I also have to say, well, by how much more? Okay? So there's 2 answers there. So when I write my sentence to answer this question, I need to make sure I have both answers in there. Well, this is really a 3-step problem. First, I need to know how much Joe made. Then I need to know how much Todd made to figure out who made more and by how much. Well, if Joe works 6 hours and for each hour he makes 8, then I want to do 6 times 8, and that's going to give me $48. Okay? So Joe makes $48, and I'm going to put a little J for Joe. Well, now I need to figure out what Todd makes. Todd worked 7 hours. Each of his hours he makes $7. So I need to do 7 hours times $7 an hour for every hour. Well, that's going to give me 7 times 7 is 49. See, I had to think a little bit there. I confused myself. Okay, so here's $49. And that was Todd. So I can see clearly that Todd made more money. And this is actually not that difficult to figure out how much more. 49 is 1 more than 48. So Todd makes more money, and then I would say he makes $1 more in my final answer. So really this had multiple steps. First I had to multiply to find out what Joe made. Then I had to multiply to find out what Todd made. And then at the end I had to subtract. I had to take the bigger amount, the 49, and I had to subtract 48 to see how much more, because I was comparing the quantities. Remember? When we compare, we subtract. I was comparing the quantities to see who made more. And of course I can really look at this and I know that here's 48 and 49 is just 1 more. So I would answer by saying Todd made more money and he made $1 more than his brother Joe. Alright, well here's our third word problem, and I want you to take a look at it. I want you to read this problem, pause the video. On your guided notes, I want you to see if you can figure this out, and then I'll go over it and see what we have. Okay, go ahead. Alright, well you should have paused it. Hopefully you paused it and you tried it yourself, and now you're going to check the answer. Okay, let's go over this problem together. Tanya walked her dog 3 times a day. Each time she walked her dog, she would walk 2 miles. How many miles did Tanya walk her dog in 4 days? Alright, so there's a lot going on here, and I got to break it down. The first thing I need to figure out is what are they asking me? Well, they want to know how many miles Tanya walked in 4 days. Well, before I can figure out how many she walked in 4 days, I need to know how much she walked in 1 day. Right? So let's look at the information. 1 day equals what? Well, it says that each time she walked her dog, She walks her dog 3 times a day. So in one day, she's going to walk her dog 3 times, and she is going to go 2 miles every time she walks her dog. So 3 times 2 equals 6 miles. So we know right now that in one day, she's going to go 6 miles. Okay? Because she walks her dog 3 times a day, goes 2 miles every time she goes out to walk her dog. So total, in one day, she'll go 6 miles. So there are 4 days. So if I take my 4 and I multiply by 6 miles a day, then I know that's going to end up being 24 miles. So Tanya in 4 days will walk 24 miles. As you can see in this problem, hopefully you guys were able to solve this on your own, but as you can see in this word problem, we first had to solve this here, what she walked in one day, before we could then solve what she walked in 2 days. This is one of those, if you look at this, this is one of those multiplication sentences with 3 factors, right? Like look here, it would have been 3 miles times 2 times 4. She walks, every time she walks, she goes 3 miles. Every time she walks her dog 3 times and goes 2 miles for 4 days. 3 times 2 times 4 would give you the same answer. Alright, hopefully you guys got this right. We're going to do a lot more word problems with multi-steps. Hopefully you read to understand the problem. What are they asking you? What's going on? How can you use the numbers to help you solve and answer the questions? Alright guys, see you tomorrow.